all doing well? Louder? Wow, that was awesome. I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker here, Justin Warren. He runs Pivot 9 and has more than 20 years of experience in the open source space. Does everybody here like open source? Do you want to see it keep going? And please give a very big round of applause for Justin Warren.
Hey. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Hello, everyone. I know we're after lunch, so I'm going to try to G you up so we're not too tired. And how many people carb loaded over lunchtime? Yeah, okay, nap time in 20 minutes, maybe. I'm going to try to hoover through this thing really kind of a bit quicker than normal because I really want to get to some questions if we can. Hoping we can do questions at the end. So let's go. This is me. I'm the principal consultant at Pivot 9, but you already heard that. We don't need to look at my face. Where to begin? Sustaining open source software. It's a big topic, so I am not going to go through all the details. I'm going to summarise and gloss over things. I'm going to skip a lot of the nuances and so on. If you want to come and argue with me about nuance, more than happy to. Buy me a drink first. 4 things I want you to get out of this talk. I want you to understand that maintenance matters more than creation, that ecosystems matter more than artifacts, that systems are more powerful than individuals, and finally that humans matter more than computers. And summing up all of that idea is this concept that I love to promote, which is that the purpose of a system is what it does. Yes, you can buy the t-shirt. So how did we get into this position? I would argue that this is the problem. This is what everyone is complaining about. Yes, this is an oversimplification, but broadly, people are grumpy about where all the profits are going from what we call loosely free and open source software. It's not really going to the maintainers. And we need to talk about why that happened before we can start to diagnose what we should do about it. There have been many other talks today that I recommend that you go and listen to, but particularly, I want to focus on this idea that maintenance matters more than creation. I think there was a mistake that was made right back at the beginning of the open source movement related to that concept. There are 4 types of goods in economic theory. Who knows anything about the 4 types of goods? Anyone seen this before? No? Okay. Broadly, private goods, toll goods, public goods, and common pool resources, which is a thing that you may not have heard about before. And that's what I'm going to be talking about a little bit. Of those 4 ideas, what do you think software is? Show of hands if it's a private good. Okay, show of hands about toll good. Okay, show of hands for public good. Show of hands on common pool resource. Ooh, interesting. Okay. Correct answer is all of them. Yeah, which is, not everyone put their hand up all the time. And the thing that I really want you to concentrate on here is the 2 axes are important, subtractability of use and exclusion difficulty. I'll refer to them as I go when it's important. But the top of this diagram, I think, is something I really want you to focus on. I think free and open source software belongs up here in the top right, and on the top left is a different kind of open source software, which I would call reference software. Things like ELIZA, that happens to be public domain. But I think the reference versus living software is an important distinction that's kind of been overlooked, and that was part of the maintenance versus creation mistake right back at the beginning. So why is it like this? I recommend that you go and look at some other talks, which I'll give you some links at the moment, but largely this picture demonstrates one of the reasons. For about 20 years, the entire tech industry has been trying to do a Google, i.e., create a thing and then either IPO for lots and lots of money or, like many of these companies, get bought by Google. The reason for that is that VC funding was very important in the foundation of many of the organisations that started off this last 20, 25 years worth of industry. They were VC funded. And the important part of VC funding is that the reason to fund something is to get your money back. What the company actually does doesn't matter. What matters is whether you get your money back, and the ways that you do that generally are you IPO, i.e. sell it to the public, or you get bought by someone else, sell it to a private company. And that led to this mistake. Many companies thought that if you were popular, that was the same as being profitable. Turns out that's not true. It was true enough for a few companies that they got very popular and then figured out how to make the money later, and lots of people copied that idea without really thinking about it. And because this doesn't always apply, it didn't really work for them, which led to a lot of conversations like this, particularly in the last couple of years, where companies who had encouraged all of their customers to please use my product for free as much as possible, and everyone said, yep, awesome, we'll do that, and then they thought, hang on, where's the money? We can't keep paying all of our staff. We can't keep building their stuff. We can't keep maintaining our company and our software if there's no money in it. But we built this system to do this. And the purpose of a system is what it does. If we don't like what that system is doing, then we need to change the system so that it will do something else. And that's where ecosystems come in. So remember back a couple of slides ago where I said ELIZA and free and open source software are different? That's because ELIZA is an artifact. It exists as a static thing, whereas ecosystems are dynamic. They change, they evolve, they need to be maintained. This is a talk that Christopher Neugebauer, who's sitting over there, I have this link that you should go and watch, which is the talk that he did at Monktoberfest last year, because his current talk isn't up yet because he only just gave it earlier today. Otherwise, I would have linked to that. Do go and look at this. I'm not going to reprise all of it, but he broadly goes into how we got into this kind of state, and his last talk also does a bit more of that, which is excellent because I don't have to do it now. But I do want to highlight this particular aspect. This is a slide from Christopher's talk previously, which is about the ecosystem. It's not about the code. The mistake a lot of the licensing conversations that we have about talking about particular companies, they are talking about very specific things, and the focus on the code, the open source and the free nature of the software overlooks everything else that is involved in the process of making and maintaining software, the ecosystem in which your software lives. And that's vital. Not understanding that, I think, is at the core of a lot of what is causing this sustainability challenge. Because this is newish data. This is from October of 2024, research by the Sovereign Tech Agency, which broadly shows that about 30% of projects are maintained by one person, and 2 to 3 are maintained, and another 40%-ish are maintained by 2 or 3 people. So around 70% of free and open source software is maintained by 3 or fewer people. That's not many, particularly given that there are millions of these projects. I've gone and had a look at the ecosystems data set. It's a little bit opaque and I haven't had time to go through it in great detail, but it broadly aligns with this. If anything, it kind of skews more towards the one-person maintained projects, depending on how alive they are. And this is difficult to see because, unfortunately, their slide wasn't particularly great. But broadly, it's if you sum up all of the numbers, and when they were asked, are you getting paid enough to maintain open source software, about 77% of people said no. Some of them are getting paid a bit, but most of them are not getting paid either at all or not enough for me to be doing this as my job, which means it's being cross-subsidised by something else. Now, why would you do that? Why would you work on this stuff for free? Partly, it's because we as an ecosystem have pushed people to do this. All these VC companies have been pushing out stuff for free. They have been setting the expectation that open source software should be free and that you should work on it for free. Not that you should create something and give it away and here is an artifact, please have it, it's great, it's ELIZA, reference it, look at it. That's different. They're saying that not only do you release it once, but you have to keep working on it for free, forever. People do this because they think their expertise is going to be useful, that it's kind of a marketing exercise. And that sounds a lot like working for exposure, and even penguins die of exposure. So maybe we shouldn't do that, because this is what the cost-benefit allocation generally looks like for the people in this ecosystem. Again, I'm not going to go through this in massive detail, but if you look here, people who are hobbyists or just general contributors, they kind of contribute a bit. It's not a bad deal for them, but for maintainers, it's not a very good deal at all. For vendors, it's awesome. And one particular thing I want to point out here is the different kind of maintainers. For most maintainers, this is a raw deal, but people do it because like the entertainment industry, where you have lots of maintainers who are, well, we can call them actors, who are working as waiters, or they have a day job that subsidises this thing that they do, hoping that one day they will be famous, ignoring the fact that for every good kind of famous, like maybe Linus or Guido van Rossum, there is the bad kind of famous, i.e. being a woman on the internet. This is the purpose of the system that we have created, and we need to change it. But what do we change it into? Coming back to this different type of good. I argue that free and open source software is a common pool resource, and we should maintain it as a common pool resource, not as a public good. And that means that we can look at governing the commons and the work of this wonderful woman, Elinor Ostrom, who is a Nobel Prize winner in economics. She won the Nobel Prize in, I think it was 2012, if I remember correctly. No, that's when she died. 2005. I have to mention this briefly because when I talk about commons, generally people think of the tragedy of the commons. Go and read that paper and then never talk about it ever again. The paper will explain why. Tragedy of the commons is a false and dangerous myth that was wrong when the paper was originally produced, and Elinor Ostrom's work had already proven that. So let's not talk about that. Let's talk about Elinor Ostrom's work. When you're managing common pool resources, these are the 8 design principles, as she and her colleagues call them, that you should be using. Now, I say should because if the more of these 8 principles that are present in your project or in your initiative or in whatever it is that you're doing, the more of them that you are doing, the more likely it is that your project will be successful and sustainable. You don't have to have all of them, but the more of them, the better. And I'm not going to talk about all of them because I don't have time. So instead, I'm going to focus on a few of them because the systems that you use these design principles to create are more powerful than the individuals. They constrain individual behaviour, and the systemic design is what I want you to focus on. We need to look at how the system functions, not about the individual behaviour, because the two things influence one another. And I want to talk about these 3 in particular. The first one is congruence, which is broadly why people are grumpy. At the moment, there isn't a lot of congruence between what people are putting into a project and what they're getting out of it. There are people who are not putting anything into these projects and extracting a lot of benefit from it, and there are people who are not actually extracting very much benefit but putting a lot of it into the projects. That's not very congruent. Turns out, congruence is important, and the fact that we haven't designed a system with that in mind is probably something we need to change. But how? Well, we have to figure out what congruence actually means. So if someone isn't putting in as much as they're taking out, and we disagree with that, we might be in conflict. So what do we do about that? How do we resolve that conflict? I would argue that in the open source, and particularly open source, but the free and open source community, we have done a woeful job of designing conflict resolution mechanisms before we need them, before there's a crisis. Even to the point of having codes of conduct, which we kind of now do, but not universally, that happened very late. We need to design conflict resolution mechanisms for the conflicts that are going to exist in our ecosystems, in our projects, before we need them. And I would also argue that the one that we've used the most, licensing, is the wrong one. Or it's one choice, it's not the only choice, and it's actually one of the less powerful ones, and we need to have other choices. Ostrom particularly values things that are local, low cost, and fast. At the moment, when we lean on the legal mechanisms that work for private companies, they are incredibly slow, very heavy, they incur a massive cost on the participants of that and also the rest of the ecosystem. They're not well designed, they're not congruent, they're not the way that we should be managing common pool resources. But when I say we, Well, I'm talking about who's actually in charge of these things. Many of the projects that part of the reason that we're here, these projects are run by companies. They're not really run by people. I hate to break it to you, but corporations are not democracies. They're actually authoritarian dictatorships. And that's how they function. So if you've got 3 maintainers for a project and they're all employed by the one company, guess who's in charge of that project? You're not making collective choice arrangements. There isn't much collective choice going on. So I would argue that we need to get into much more collective choice. We need to be designing those mechanisms into our projects from the outset, not trying to impose them later on. Having a benevolent dictator for life might be very quick and efficient at the very beginning, but we need to move away from that model very, very quickly. And in fact, most projects that are sustainable have done that. They've just done it much later. We need to design that in at the beginning, because the purpose of a system is what it does. So if we want a different outcome from our system, we need to design it differently. But change is coming, and change is not coming from within the tech industry. It's coming from outside, because humans matter more than computers, particularly to people who don't like computers or don't use them very much, i.e. most people in the world. It's not coming from in the tech industry, because we don't make very good computers. They break a lot. They're getting worse. People are trying to do things with their computing devices. I was talking to my mother only this weekend, and she is incredibly frustrated with her phone because Apple moved where the delete email button went, and she can't work out how to do something that simple. And this is a company that broadly has a reputation for being very good about user experience and user interface design. That's what our perception is from the broader industry. We also managed to take down a lot of important infrastructure systems all over the world in a single day because one company pushed out an update a little bit too quickly without testing it. Whoops. That's the industry that everyone else has to deal with, and they're not happy about it. So they're starting to make it more difficult for companies to do this. It's particularly coming to the IoT device section of the industry, mostly for national security reasons. It turns out governments don't like it when it's really easy for you to take out an entire country's infrastructure. So they're passing various laws about critical infrastructure and how that needs to be maintained. It's also being passed in laws around IoT, and I want to point you at particular couple of bits of legislation that I recommend that you familiarise yourself with, particularly the EU Cyber Resilience Act, but there are some elements around IoT in the Australia's Cyber Security Act. Essentially, if you are a manufacturer of a device that will be able to be connected to the internet, that warranty disclaimer thing at the beginning of software where you've used the software and if it sets fire to your data center and your cat, too bad, that's going away. We are not going to be able to get away with that anymore because there are going to be consequences for doing that. And interestingly, open source is in a good position for that. Now, this is important because when companies incur consequences for shipping buggy software that they refuse to fix, governments are going to start imposing costs on them. That's going to make them more interested in paying people to make that liability go away. By increasing their willingness to pay, that money can go into the people and the projects that maintain and look after that software. Remember what we had back at the beginning about maintenance being more important than creation? It's not about this thing that exists, it's about how it gets changed, how the bugs get fixed, how we update it later on after 5 years have passed and it turns out things are different now. But stable systems resist change. That's what stable means, but we have an advantage there. Now, the current system of doing this where it's all extractive and we make loads of money because other people like working on our stuff for free, for reasons that we don't want to disturb. Shh, don't tell anyone, they're getting a bad deal. It turns out this was a great deal for everyone for a long time, so open source is everywhere. How many people have used a computing device that includes 0 open source software in the last year? How would you even know? But I can almost guarantee that everyone in this room has used software that contains open source software in the last year. In fact, today. It's almost impossible to get away with. And that means that these companies who need to make changes have 2 choices. One, they can rip out all the open source software they've been using for the last 25 plus years basically for free and replace all of it with proprietary software that they get from somewhere. Or they can pay someone to maybe fix some stuff and make the problem go away. Which one's easier? There are other options. Turns out socialism is a thing. And this one's gotten a lot more interesting in the last, let me count. I can't count from January, but this year, because a lot of people have realised that, turns out one country is kind of the centre of the tech universe. What if they're not a reliable partner anymore? Maybe sovereign technology is a thing we should look at a bit more. So the Sovereign Tech Agency from Germany was already doing good work in this space, but it was a bit out here on the edge. Now we have talk of Eurostack, for example, where maybe Europe should have a cloud that isn't completely welded to one country, who may not actually like us very much today. I think we should be doing more of that. That is collective action. It's a systems change. It doesn't rely on individuals doing things differently. We also see a bit of a public health response. Again, this is mostly coming from the cybersecurity angle, not so much from a, wouldn't it be nice if we actually paid people to do this? It's like, we don't want stuff to break so much. People are grumpy. They're not really going fast enough for my liking. They're going to put stickers on things. If you would like one of those, you don't have to take a photo of it, or you can go to that QR code and you can design one of these and print it yourself. Please go and put cyber ratings on all of your documents. That would amuse me no end. Australia is actually going to come up with a cyber rating kind of labelling scheme. They haven't finished designing the labels yet. They aren't licensing this from me, which I think is a shame. But they will be doing this. That's fine. This kind of labelling thing, it does work, but it takes about 10 years to actually have any effect. So it might start working eventually. It's better than nothing, but it's not sufficient. Let's not let them give up on that. But this, I think, is the most powerful thing. And I don't think we do this enough. When someone comes to you and says, will you please maintain your software for free for me? You should tell them no. Please sign up for a support contract. Otherwise, I am not going to fix your bug. What are they going to do? Now, for many of us, that will be difficult because we feel that there is a moral imperative that we fix security flaws in software that we gave everyone for free, years ago in some cases, and we feel like, well, I'm responsible for this. If you're not being paid for it, no, you're not. You gave something away for free. No one was under any obligation to pick it up off the side of the street, whack it into a commercial product, which they then push out to millions of people all over the world, charging a fortune for it, and then never fixing any of the bugs in it. Also, you're legally prohibited from reverse engineering my thing and fixing it yourself. That's a raw deal. Just say no. And at the end of all of that, I think that we are in a good position to actually change this, because of the legislation changes that are happening from outside the industry. We could do a lot more to fix this ourselves, but so far it hasn't happened. But I encourage you to do everything that you can to push it in that direction and to support the endeavours of those who are coming from outside to impose costs on the industry, to make it more costly to not do the right thing. So that if you are a commercial company putting open source software in your product, selling that to people, and it's not fit for purpose, or it has security bugs, or it doesn't support a marginalised community, or it's not accessible, they can come at you and say, no, that is not acceptable, in the same way that it's not acceptable that you sell me bread that is full of sawdust or coffee that is poisoned. We don't accept it from other products. The period of time in which we did accept it for software is coming to an end, and it's coming to an end quickly. Get ready for it, because it's happening. I think we should encourage it to happen faster, because then we will all be better off and the software that we make will be more sustainable. And that is pretty much the end of my talk. Remember, these are the 4 ideas. Maintenance is more important than creation. Ecosystems matter more than artifacts. Systems matter more than systems are more powerful than individuals, and humans matter more than computers. The purpose of a system is what it does. Thank you. I think we have time for questions.
Thanks very much. Yeah, we do have time for a couple of questions.
Excellent.
Anybody out there like to
Questions,
ask a question?
please.
One over here.
Please go. While the mic goes back there, I would like to just point out this. This is a fabulous book that I am annoying everyone with. It's called The Care of Things, The Ethics and Politics of Maintenance. It's fab. Please read it. It's great. The authors are French. The book is so French.
I'm with a big corporation, 1,600 people with a gazillion users of Python. What's our obligation to support Python?
Your obligation, according to society, is 0. I think that should change. Your moral obligation, I think, is to, yes, support it. How your company is structured and what risks you as a company face if you don't support it, i.e. if the people who do it suddenly turn around and tell you, yeah, nah, not today, we're not gonna, what leverage do you have? If you pick something up for free and the people who maintain that decide that, no, not gonna. Or, like we've seen in a few places, I'm going to sell access to Russian hackers today because I make loads of money doing that. Does that place you at any risk? Have you hedged against that risk? Something to consider.
I don't normally do this, but I'm going to give a comment. I'm with the Python...
Please phrase your questions in the form of a question.
If you want to figure out how to give the Python Software Foundation money and support Python financially, do come and speak to me. I'm with the foundation and we would love to talk.
Please do so.
Any other questions?
Any?
You mentioned a couple pieces of legislation which, as I got it, sort of have liability and consequences for things not working properly. Does that apply to just the end product or also components, like little libraries that'll say this has no warranty express or implied?
Yes, it does. There is some nuance in it because in the original formulation, it was going to apply to everything, which would have meant that open source projects would have been liable for stuff they gave away for free. People realised that, that's not good. That'll basically kill everything. Also, it's not workable. They were quite smart about how they've designed it. Liability actually flows through the supply chain. And there's ways to get around it. But essentially, if you're selling a product for free, and software is a product, then you are liable as a manufacturer, but also as someone who incorporates it. So both parties are liable, and you can't just contract away the liability either. So you can't just say, oh, we'll sign a support contract and you are now on the hook for billions of dollars of liability. It doesn't work that way either. But there's a bunch of nuance in it, which I'm more than happy to talk to people about. Another question there?
Thank you. Yeah.
Hello. Do you have any commentary about the balance of, I know that there's things about artists creating work and then being told to monetize it straight away, and a lot of hobby programmers are in the same kind of direction. Do you have any commentary about the balance of doing something that you enjoy in your own free time versus doing something that you then want people to pay you for versus something that you feel responsible, and removing the joy from creating is sometimes the effect that I've seen out of that. Yeah, so
it's tricky. On the one hand, I would say yes, it's fine if you want to a point. But it's nuanced. So on the one hand, if that's what you want to do and it's relatively minor, it's not a big deal because you're doing it for joy and for love. It's also a finished thing that doesn't need to be maintained. So a thing that needs to be maintained is a little bit more nuanced, but you also are part of society. So if you ignore what the rest of society does, and you, particularly if you are prominent in a field, I would say there's a greater responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. So if you're a very powerful person in that particular ecosystem, what you do matters more. So if you are setting the precedent that, hey, all of you should work for free, I'm fine because I have a trust fund because I inherited wealth. So I can totally work for free in the arts or in the library or whatever I want to do. And we have a whole bunch of industries that are structured more or less in that way. That's not fair on all the people who didn't inherit wealth. There are, of course, other possible solutions to inherited wealth that are possibly beyond the scope of this particular talk, but we are on Collective Action Day today, so we can also talk about that. I remain long guillotine futures.
I think that's all we have time for the questions.
All right.
Another big round of applause for Justin Warren, please. I'd like to offer you that on behalf of the convention as a thank you.